as part of our continued efforts to reach the African and other ethnic communities in the United Kingdom with greater impacts and create the platform to hear your silent and unheard views in this hugely growing community in the United Kingdom, our channel, Ben TV, presents to you another live current affairs television program. Our focus on the program is to review and discuss issues around the diaspora community in the UK. The program offers you that unrestricted voice on issues affecting you in the UK. Join us live every Monday at 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Another business segment of Dialogue in Diaspora, 2 to 3 p.m. every Monday. But guess what? You know you can be part of the program. Just send us an email at bentelevisionuk@gmail.com. Dialogue in Diaspora, your voice, your opinion on our TV. This is Voice coming to you from Ben Television. My name is Tunde Alabi, and on the program today we're taking a look at the issue of social services and child adoption. There has been quite a lot of issues around social services and of course children being taken over by social services, and some ending up being adopted in extreme cases. Families being affected by issues around their children and social services, and in some extreme cases leading to adoptions. Can adoption be revoked by court, especially when at the end of the day it is found out that the parents of the child or children are not guilty of the offenses they have been accused of? These are issues you're taking a look at on the program today. My name is Tunde Alabi. The program is Voice. It is a legal educational program where we bring to you information around legal matters here in the United Kingdom. My guest in the studio today is Jennifer Obaseki. Jennifer is a senior partner at Obaseki Solicitors based here in the United Kingdom. She'll be joining me to review the issue of social services and child adoption. Jennifer, thank you for being part of the program today. In my intro, we spoke about social services. There have been quite a whole lot of issues around social services, parents and children, and in some extreme cases, adoption. Let's start with some of the responsibilities of social services in family and children matter.
Well, obviously each child is born into a family, or some may be living with their step-parents or guardians. So there's a range of different types of family units that are out there. The local authority has a responsibility for every single child that is living in its borough. So it has a responsibility to make sure that child is not homeless, not destitute, has sufficient food and education, and basically all elements of the child's welfare. The idea and the word that is used is safeguarding. So in the past, many local authorities were criticised for not having in place enough safeguarding elements to make sure a child doesn't fall through the net. There was the cases of Baby P and Victoria Columbier, where they were both children who were subject to abuse and were brought to the attention of the local authority after different incidents, but yet there was no action taken by the local authority. So in order for the local authority not to be criticised, there's legislation that's been passed, powers, and an element and culture of safeguarding. So if the local authority feels that a child is in danger and their welfare or they're at risk of harm, then they have the power to take steps to protect the child. So there's lots of obligations on a local authority, and the powers now that are in place with the law for them to be able to step in and apply for various court orders in order to secure the protection of that child or young person. Even if the person's a young teen, they have the power to step in and provide a level of security and also provision for that child.
In some instances, at what point would parents be falling foul of the regulations around their rights towards their children that could attract the attention of social services?
Well, quite commonly there's the issue of discipline. So if you've overly disciplined your child, for example, if you've used physical chastisement and it's unreasonable. Most recently, there's been a case that was brought to the High Court where a father who was not from an English background, but a judge actually agreed with that father that you have to look at the individual black backgrounds of the families, and sometimes what may be seen as harsh in the eyes of an English social worker may not be seen as harsh from a person's background who's from outside the country. That is not a justification for child abuse, but what it means is that there is different approaches to which people discipline their children. You are not allowed to abuse your child. You're not allowed to physically beat your child. You're not allowed to chastise, withhold food and basic requirements from your children. So that's one of the areas that parents fall foul. But there's other things as well. For example, being negligent if your child is not at home, not sleeping at home, being allowed to go out late at night, abusing substances. Also, if the child has prolifically bad behaviour, shoplifting, constant shoplifting, playing truant. Obviously, we've had a lot of parents on the shows talking about the right to take their children outside of the UK during term time because it's cheaper. So not allowing your child, or making sure rather that your child is in school at a punctual time and regularly, they're making sure their attendance is fine, are things that could bring you into the eyes of the local authority and also leave you open to receiving a fine or prosecution. So there's many different actions that unfortunately lead parents into the, let's say, the eyes of social services. Then when you have the level of being under their, let's say, assessment, there may be an obligation for them to carry out a risk assessment on you and your family and your child's situation, or prescribe a fine if they feel you've fallen foul of the rules. And in those situations, it's important you do take legal advice. But where they feel, the local authority feels that they have to take the children away from you in order to carry out an assessment, or because they feel the child's in immediate risk, they can refer either the matter to the police to ask that the child be taken into care under police protection, and there is a set number of hours in which a police sergeant can order that a child be taken out from the family and held under police protection. For example, if there's the risk that they feel a child may be being taken out of the country to be subject to maybe child marriage or subject to female genitalia mutilation, or for any reason that may place the child at extreme risk. The other way that the local authority could take action in that circumstance is they can apply to court for an emergency protection order, or they can even apply to the High Court for an injunction to have the child taken away from you and placed into protection, or for a specific measure under a High Court injunction, for example, for you to surrender the child's passport into the court or to be handed to the police. But most of the time, they look to cooperate with the family. So they want a level of engagement, a level of cooperation. So most local authorities will ask parents to sign a Section 20 agreement, but lots of people have really, when they come to our offices asking for help, many do talk about the pressure and the wrong advice that is given at that stage. So for example, you're a parent, you go to collect your child from school, and unfortunately you're told you cannot see your child has made some allegations. And you know, for most people that's such a shock, trauma. One, you're not being allowed to see the child that is yours, and two, at that time and that time of day, how do you get legal advice at short notice? You know, and do you agree with social services to let them take the child? Or do you then succumb to what they're threatening you with? Maybe if you don't agree to sign and give us your consent, we're going to go to court, or we're going to call the police, we're going to use police powers, etc. And many people agree, but under duress, because they're being told that that's the fastest way for them to see their child. But regardless, it is important that the local authority do their job, which is to help you and protect your child. But it's also important for you to take comprehensive legal advice and insist on getting the time to get that proper legal advice.
Okay. The issue around social services and taking children away from their parents, at what point can parents fight social services taking their children away from them?
when we say fight, we don't mean physically.
Not physically.
But how can they challenge it?
Challenge, let's put it that way. Let me use the legal term. At what point can parents actually challenge social services taking their children away? And what are the processes?
The processes, number one, it depends under which power the local authority has taken the children into their care. Number one, is it the case that the children are in police protection? So what the parent might have to do in that situation is find out from the officer when the clock has started ticking, the exact hour, because once that time limit expires, the local authority will have a choice either to hand back the child or ask the parents to go to a next stage, which may either be sign a consensual agreement or go to court. If the parents have signed a consensual agreement, a Section 20, and there's a defined time under which the local authority is saying, look, we're not sure what's happening right now, we're not sure what your child is saying, we want to interview, assess the child, assess the situation, so we want you to agree just to calm things down, give us time, and for us to be sure that the child's not at risk for, 48 hours, 2 days, 3 days. And it depends on the duration of that Section 20 agreement. Most of the time, it's for a period of approximately 3 days. But there is no defined time on the Section 20. It's all about a consensual agreement. And if you don't know where your child is being placed during that time, it can be concerning. Most of the time it's with foster parents. But if you come to an agreement with social services that it's going to be with a relative, if you have a relative or a close family friend that will agree equally to the terms of that agreement, i.e. part of the agreement may be that the parent doesn't see the child. If you as an auntie, say, are called in to help a person or your sister who is being asked to sign one of these agreements, and one of those conditions is you don't let mum or dad see the child while the child's placed with you, you have to stick to the terms of the agreement.
Do you need legal advice? Do you need professional help at a reasonable cost? At Obaseki Solicitors we have experts in property law, human rights, criminal litigation, immigration, civil litigation, family law, business law, landlord and tenant law, employment law, Sharia law. At Obaseki Solicitors, we can provide you with advice and assistance at all levels. We have over 100 years experience in serving our local communities, and we have a new maritime and international law department. We can help you. Book a free consultation today. Obaseki Solicitors, providing you with advice and assistance at all levels.
In this type of situation, when you're accused of child abuse or you have an intervention from the local authority, anybody who has parental responsibility for the child will actually automatically get legal aid. So if you are worried about the cost of challenging or having to pay for expert opinion to refute an allegation of abuse, then you are allowed a certain amount of legal aid to cover the cost of experts, your legal team, and also for assessments. So there are rules as to whether the cost should be shared, etc. But if there is a need for even expert advice, you have entitlement to legal aid. And even if you are not fully the biological parent of the child, insofar as you have a very close relationship, so for example, if you're a grandparent, if you are a step parent, or even a foster parent, you can apply for funding, but you can also make an application to be allowed to be a person who comes on court record. So they're called interveners, but you're allowed to make the application. So again, if you're an aunt or a relative that has spent a lot of time with the child, you can equally make an application to, let's say, be involved in the proceedings if you're looking out for the best interests of that child. Again, for the criminal element, the criminal element will proceed separately from the civil element, being the element that continues of the case that goes in the family court. Criminal legal aid, again, if the offence is very serious, yes, you'll be entitled to qualify for legal aid. It's based on not just the nature of the offence, but also your income as well. If you're a multimillionaire, your assets will be looked at, then you may not qualify. But insofar as your income is below a certain level, you will be entitled. And if the nature of the allegation is extremely serious, then yes, you will automatically qualify. So you've got to realise that if the allegation that's being held against you is one of serious child abuse or neglect, or on the element of risk or harming a child in some way, you're likely to face, if you're the parent, you're likely to face action by the local authority, or if you're the guardian and the child came to harm whilst in your care, you're likely to face sanction from the local authority or intervention of some sort. But if it's a criminal offence, you are likely to face charge and prosecution through the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. So again, making sure you have a criminal lawyer and a family lawyer are going to be very, very important.
Okay, now let's look at, let's consider a situation where the case involving the parents and the social services has to do with parents that are not documented.
Yes.
And then social services are now involved in a case involving their child, daughter or son or even children. Where does this place their status, the parents and the child or the children?
This has been a situation that we've seen, and what you need to be aware of is, number one, it's important that you do step forward if your child is in trouble. So don't feel that you shouldn't come out. Number two, even if your documents are not in order, for example, you've not put the right parents' names on the child's birth certificate if the child was born in the UK, or you have no documentation to actually confirm the true identity of the child or yourself, it doesn't mean that you should stay in the shadows while the local authority take and assess your child, because your child could be taken away from you permanently. What you need to know is that the local authority is used to dealing with all types of family circumstances. So they have met or dealt with people who are in worse situations than yourself, let me say it like that. So you must step forward. Nobody is going to automatically detain and arrest you simply because you've given birth or you have brought a child into the United Kingdom that is not documented, so far as you haven't trafficked that child and endangered that child deliberately or deliberately harmed that child. So you must not have that as a reason that you don't seek legal help or step forward to identify yourself as a parent. If there's doubt that you're a parent, number one, you will be assessed. There is DNA tests. The child will instantly, if the child's of speaking and vocal age, they will be able to identify you as a parent. Even if it's a case that you're not the biological parent but you're the caregiver, and this used to happen during the conflict during Congo, if I use that as an example, and also during most of the refugee crisis, you may have people who have become the guardian of a child either through the fact that their parent has died or been misplaced due to the fact that there's a crisis, and the child is still able to identify that this is the person who has been caring for me. My parent is either deceased, etc. So you can identify yourself as a main caregiver and explain the circumstances even if there's no formal documentation. However, the local authority will seek to pursue that child's protection and best interests. So even if you are the parent and you're not able to provide the welfare that you should be providing, i.e. you're undocumented, so you're not able to feed your child, there is an obligation, as I said, by every local authority to make sure that any child in their borough is not destitute or coming to harm. So since they have a duty of care to that child, you may be separated from that child for some time whilst an assessment is carried out or until you're able to engage services. So an assessment will identify what services you can engage and what services you're entitled to. So even if you're not entitled to benefits, you may be entitled at the end of that assessment to accommodation, to food, vouchers, any other forms of support that they see that you and your family should be entitled to. Because the failure of the local authority to meet your basic provisions is a breach of your human rights. But don't be afraid of the period of separation. If you're worried that the assessment is not being done fairly, or you feel that your certain interest, cultural influence are not being reflected properly during the assessment, or there's a complete misinterpretation of events. So what they've seen as a mark on a child is not abuse, maybe it's a birthmark, that's just another example, then you have to put that forward and make sure you are being heard as a parent. Because the last thing, and we've seen it in the newspapers this last week, where parents have wrongly been accused of abuse. For example, there's diseases that young children have, such as scurvy and wormy or bone disorder, where children limbs have been seen to be damaged or broken, and when they've gone to A&E with their parents for treatment, what's happened is the medical staff have wrongly alerted social services, and when they've come, they're doing their job, they've sought to assess the situation, but because they need time, they have then separated the child from the parent. At times, they may make a decision to do it by consent, as I've said, getting them to sign the agreement there. Obviously, the parents are under pressure. They want to prove their innocence. They'll cooperate. Or they may ask for police protection, and that means that the parents may be told you can't see your child for the next 48 hours. They're going to be under police protective powers. But the whole point is, if that medical assessment is not right and it's wrong, the fact is you may be separated from your child for a period, and it will be very, very difficult. But you, if the allegation is laid against you, you'll be able to put forward your own expert. But it all depends on timing and funding. And in the last week, we've seen two examples. I think one of the sets of parents, their child was adopted after being placed in long-term foster care because the criminal case took so long to conclude. And whilst the child was in foster care, an application was made, and the court made a final adoption order for the child, which is unfortunate. And in another situation, the child had scurvy as well, a disease that meant the bone formation unfortunately looked like abuse, whereas proper investigation showed that it was lack of vitamins and led to developmental defects, not abuse. But by the time the parents were able to prove this, unfortunately, again, the children had been adopted, and an adoption order is final, which is very sad in those situations. That's why it's very important that challenging and getting the right advice right from the beginning is very, very important, because these allegations and the process is very, very let me say, enduring. You have to have a lot of persistence. You have to have a legal team that believe in you, that are able to make sure that they are able to demonstrate the best evidence, seek out the best experts that are able to put forward your case.
Finally, as we calm down, does the social service put into consideration parents' cultural background in dealing?
Of course they do.
Say, for instance, some of the women come from Africa or Asia. Smacking is part of the culture.
Yeah, people say, of course, but at the end of the day, seeking to protect the children from over-chastisement is the important thing. In the cases that were put forward, especially the Victoria Columbia case, the child was seen to be disciplined, and the child was seen to have been possessed, so taken for prayers and overly chastised, even during the course of prayers, and subject to awful abuse. And to sit down, and if you sit down and strike a child with your hand with an object, it might be seen in one culture as discipline, using a cane to smack a child, but in another culture and in this country, it is a crime. You cannot use implements, objects to beat your child. And if you do, you are going to be arrested, especially if the child goes to school and says, Mummy used or Daddy used a slipper or a broom or whatever to beat me, or even ask me to kneel down for how many hours. All these things can be seen as abuse. So the fact is, you must do them you must do any form of physical chastisement in moderation. You don't go out to hit a child, to harm the child. You discipline with love, obviously, and care. And the issue is you have to discipline with care. There are some organizations that are pro-smacking, And even many Caucasian people are pro-smacking. But the fact is, if you set out and raise your hand to a child, it is abuse. And abuse comes in different forms. It's not just physical. There's also emotional abuse. So again, knowing how you talk to a child verbally, knowing whether you are constantly putting the child down, leading the child to feel depressed, stressed. All these things are also elements that lead to the effect of a child's welfare. So you might not even have hit your child and yet be called in by social services to say, look, this child has said, you repeatedly either send them to bed without food, as an example, or you repeatedly tell the child that they're not worth anything and they're, emotional well-being has been severely affected after being told that for years and years and years, So you've got to be careful. But they do look at cultural elements, language, religion, ethnic, traditional trends and practices, traditional practices. But those that are harmful will not be tolerated, if I say it succinctly like that. It's in our culture to give scarification, isn't it? And some other cultures. So, but if you say you want to give your child tribal marks in London, you will go to jail. It's as simple as that. Okay.
Okay. All right. On the program, we have been talking about social services and, of course, adoption order. If you do have any query, you can send us an email or you can send Jennifer a text message on the number that has scrolled on your screen. Exercise caution while trying to correct your child.
Yes.
Exhibit that correction with care and, of course, with love. This is how far we can go on the program today. My name is Tunde Alabi. Jennifer, thank you so much for being part of the program today.
Thank you, our pleasure.
All right. Do have a very good week ahead of you. Bye.
Economy, business, technology, the totality of what makes man is what we bring to you here on this sponge. We give you the information that you need, from business to economy to politics to technology, and that's all we do here on this sponge, from the beginning to the end, and that is why we are here. Keep watching this sponge from Ben Television.